Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. So, as we all know, as more time goes on, more information is reaching the public about the dangers of eating animal products, the abuses and horrors that go on in the animal industry, while the meat industry is fighting back. In fact, a viewer sent me this website, which is hosted by the American Meat Institute. And this website is dedicated to producing videos combating all these so-called myths about the bad things that we know are true about their industry. So I noticed that all these videos of theirs are hosted on YouTube. So I went over to their Meat Myth Crushers channel and saw a bunch of videos, and this one here just kind of caught my attention. That it's a myth that Americans are eating too much meat and saturated fat is good for you, or at least not bad for you. I did notice that there's a high ratio of dislikes to likes, about 4-1, and furthermore, they have all comments disabled on their videos, so they don't let people respond with the actual facts, actual science. So since they're not letting people respond, I thought I'd take it upon myself to respond to their videos. So I'm going to start with this one.
Meat consumption is actually tracked by the Department of Agriculture with USDA, and
so this person they're interviewing, as you see here, is a professor of animal sciences, so you can tell that they're going to be a little bit biased. I went over to her university page, and you see here she's very distinguished in the meat industry. She has a PhD in food science with a meats emphasis, and she teaches courses such as processed meat operations.
Is it possible to get all the nutrients you need from beans or other plant-based foods?
you can get nutrients from other foods, but you need to eat them in combination. It wouldn't be a sole source protein.
Well, isn't that ironic? This meat industry funded channel, whose purpose is to debunk myths about meat, is itself perpetuating a long debunked myth about plant-based proteins, that they're somehow incomplete. They don't contain all the essential amino acids. And like I said, this has been known for decades, that these are just purely myths.
Why is it important to make sure you eat enough from that protein category?
It's important because you need to get the right amino acid balance. You need to get available iron, which meat is an excellent source of available iron compared to plant sources.
Well, again, that's another myth. If that were true, people who don't eat meat should have higher rates of anemia, which is an iron deficiency, compared to those who do eat meat. Well, let's see if that's true.
It turns out they're no more likely to suffer from iron deficiency anemia than anybody else.
Now, you're a mother of a teenage girl, so if your daughter said, I want to be a vegetarian, what advice would you give her?
Well, this ought to be good.
I would strongly encourage her that we need to include meat as part of her diet because it is such an excellent source of iron.
She's pretty much stuck on spreading this myth that it's really difficult for people to get iron from plants, which is complete nonsense. As you see here,
Plus, the majority of total dietary iron comes mostly from plants.
so people are having no trouble getting their iron from plants. In fact, as it turns out, getting iron from animals has some negative consequences for health, but I'm sure she wouldn't tell her potentially vegetarian daughter this.
If you just look at iron intake from meat, it's associated with significantly higher risk for heart disease. The intake of meat iron, but not plant iron, was associated with increased risk of stroke as well as diabetes. Higher animal iron intake significantly associated with greater risk of type 2 diabetes, but not total or plant iron.
Well, given that this information is well established in the scientific literature, and that the American meat industry videos here are conveniently ignoring this research, it really makes me question their sincerity about setting the record straight here in these videos of theirs about the healthfulness of their products.
If she did choose to be a vegetarian, I would work with her extensively on formulating the right balance of nutrients from other foods in order to get what she needed from meat, or what she would have gotten from meat.
So basically what this meat researcher professor is saying is that meat is so essential to our nutrient intake that if we don't eat meat, we're at risk of becoming deficient in many nutrients. Is this a true fact, or is this yet another myth that they're trying to spread here?
Let's just analyze the diets of 13,000 people and compare the nutrient intake of those eating meat to those eating meat-free diets. They found that those eating vegetarian were getting higher intakes of nearly every nutrient: more fiber, more vitamin A, more vitamin C, more vitamin E, more of the B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, folate, more calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium.
So of course, yeah, us non-meat eaters are going to get more vitamin C, more potassium just by virtue of us eating more plants, but how is it also true that we're getting more calcium, more of this precious iron? Explain that, meat industry video people.
Now, some people say they're worried about saturated fat and its association with coronary heart disease. Is this something we need to be worried about?
We all need to be concerned about our health, and our heart health is part of that concern, but in terms of are we consuming too much saturated fat from meat, there has been some studies that have been released from Harvard recently that have said there's insufficient evidence between saturated fats and our heart health.
Well, she's absolutely right. The meat and dairy industry have funded many studies lately which have reached the conclusion that, maybe saturated fat isn't so bad for heart health, and hence Time magazine giving a cover story to the virtues of eating butter once again. Well, the sad truth, though, is that these industry-funded studies are there just to create doubt. Doubt is their product, much like the cigarette industry from decades before. They're trying to make it seem like there's no scientific consensus on the matter.
If you look at the recommendations from around the globe, there's a global scientific consensus to limit saturated fat intake, with most authoritative bodies recommending getting saturated fat at least under 10% of calories, with the prestigious U.S. Institute of Medicine and the European Food Safety Authority recommending to push saturated fat consumption down as low as possible. They recommend pushing saturated fat intake down to like 5 or 6% of calories. So that's what you see when you go to the American Heart Association website, no more than 5 or 6% of calories.
Bottom line message is to consume all your foods in moderation, but also include meat as a part of a healthy diet.
Of course, consume your Group 1 and Group 2A carcinogens in moderation. Well, let's see if that's even possible. To get 5% of your total calories from saturated fat, how many times a week can you really eat meat?
They're in effect saying 90% of our diet should be free of saturated fat-containing foods. So that's like the American Heart Association saying, OK, 2 meals a week can be packed with meat, dairy, and junk, but the entire rest of the week should be, unprocessed plant foods.
So as you see here, it's pretty much impossible to follow this meat industry person's recommendation of meat in moderation, saturated fat in moderation, because if you follow the American Heart Association's advice here, which is based on actual science and research into heart disease and saturated fat, as you saw here, you only could have like 2 meals a week that have meat in it. That's all for this video. Let me know your comments down below here. What do you think about the American Meat Association, the meat industry, making these videos trying to debunk the myths surrounding the unhealthfulness and humaneness of their industry? And in essence, they're just lying here. As we saw in this first video of mine, they're just lying about plant-based diets, how you can't get iron, you can't get protein. They're just creating the new myths to, they're throwing vegans and vegetarian diets under the bus to try to advance their cause here. And what's even worse is they won't let you comment on their videos. So anyway, let me know what you think about this tactic of theirs. I was completely amused when I learned about this, and I'll debunk another one of their videos in the future. So anyway, let me know down below what you think. That's it for this time. So until next time, guys, unlike the meat and dairy industry say to do, keep it carb, baby. Keep it carb.